Good day, everyone. I am Mary Joy Almasin. So, today I am going to discuss the chapter 4 of the Introduction to Sociolinguistic, titled Linguistic Varieties and Multilingual Nation. Linguistics, varieties, and multilingual nations. Over half the world's population is bilingual, and many people are multilingual. They acquire a number of languages because they need them for different purposes in their everyday interactions. So today we're going to discuss the linguistic varieties. So there are 6 vernacular languages, standard languages, world Englishes, lingua francas, pidgins, and creoles. First is we were going to discuss the vernacular language. So, an influential 1951 UNESCO report, for instance, defined a vernacular language as the first language of a group socially or politically dominated by a group with a different language. Vernacular languages also Vernacular languages are the native languages spoken by the ordinary people in a particular region or community. This language, vernacular language, are often used in everyday communication and are typically learned at home rather than formal education. So the characteristic of vernacular languages, informal, so that is one of the characteristics of vernacular languages. Informal everyday speech, often not codified in written form, may include regional dialects and colloquialism, used in personal, familial, and community contexts. For example, in countries such as USA, where English is the language of dominant group, a language like Spanish is referred to as a Chicano's child's vernacular, but Spanish would not be regarded as a vernacular language in Spain, Uruguay, or Chile, where it is an official language. Another example, like children are talking with their friends, used informal language from his places. That is the vernacular language that they use. Additional example also, in many parts of India, regional languages like Tamil, Bengali, or Marathi serve as vernacular languages, spoken at home and in local communities. So there are 3 components of the meaning of the term vernacular. The most basic refers to the fact that a vernacular is an uncodified or unstandardized variety. The second refers to the way it is acquired in the home as a first variety. Third is the fact that it is used for relatively circumscribed functions. So that is vernacular languages. Now let's proceed to standard languages. Standard languages is the way to use language in official and formal situations, as in newspapers and public speeches. The core idea of standard language is to codify a public. Again, codify a public, particularly written language so that it is accessible to every speaker of the language to be used in education, media, and science. Recognized as a prestigious variety or code by community. So at first, the vernacular language is uncodified, while the standard languages is codified. The term standard is even more slippery than vernacular because it is used in many different ways by linguists. And standard languages are form of language. Again, remember, standard languages are form of language that have been formalized and codified, often through grammar books, dictionaries, and official usage. These languages are typically used in formal settings such as government, education, and media. So, that is standard languages. So, the characteristic of standard languages. The characteristic of standard languages is codified and standardized grammar and vocabulary, used in formal communication, writing, and media, taught in schools, and is used in official documents, often promoted by government and institution to ensure uniformity. So here's an example of here's an example of standard languages. Standard British English is used in the UK formal writing. Again, standard British English is used in the UK for formal writing, education, and media with standardized grammar and spelling. So the differences between the vernacular and standardized. The vernacular languages is informal, not codified, while the standard languages recognize a prestigious code by a community. The standard languages are codified and standardized grammar and vocabulary and used in formal communication. So let's proceed to the World Englishes. World Englishes. Standard English has provided a variety that is very useful for communicating in areas with diverse dialects. Local variation of English with special linguistic features have been developed in various countries such as Malaysia, Singapore, Hong Kong, India. The term World Englishes and New Englishes have been used to regulate the distance from variation in English that have been developed since the 19th century. For those who use English as second language, Katru, please correct me if I'm wrong in that pronunciation, has been classified as an outer circle to compare them with native speaker or inner circle. Katru always support expanding circle for those who learned as a foreign language. So in World Englishes refers to the various forms of English spoken and written worldwide, reflecting the linguistic and cultural diversity of English-speaking communities. These varieties have evolved due to historical, social, and geographical factors. So the characteristic of the word English is diverse accent, vocabularies, and grammatical structures, influenced by local languages and cultures, includes varieties like Indian English, Singaporean English, Nigerian English, etc. For example, Indian English includes unique expression and words such as postpone, to reschedule to an earlier date, and batchmate, a fellow student from the same cohort. Next, Nigerian English in Nigeria, Australian English in Australia. So that is an example of world Englishes. Now let's proceed to lingua franca. Lingua franca is a language used when people speaking different vernacular dialects want to communicate with each other. This language is also known as a bridge language, language of the Franks, common language, or a trade language because it's provide a way for different ethnicities to communicate. For instance, in a country like Malaysia, there are many vernacular languages that people from different ethnic groups use, but English and Malay represent official third-part languages. So if we say lingua franca, a lingua franca is a language used as a common means of communication between speakers of different languages. It is often adopted in trade, diplomacy, and multicultural regions where no single language is dominant. The characteristic of lingua franca serve as a bridge language for communication, may evolve naturally or be chosen for its widespread use, not necessarily the native language of any speakers involved. So here's an example. English as a global lingua franca. Swahili in East Africa. Arabic during the Middle Ages in the Middle East and North Africa. And French in parts of Africa and Europe. Additional example also is English is often used as a lingua franca in international business, where people from different linguistic backgrounds use it to communicate. So, Pidgins and Creoles. Pidgin is a new language. Pidgin is a new language which developed in situations where the speaker of different language need to communicate but do not share a common language. So a pidgin is a simplified language that developed as a means of communication between groups who do not share a common language. Pidgin have limited vocabulary and simplified grammar, evolving in contexts like trade or colonization. So the characteristic of pidgin: simplified grammar and vocabulary, no native speakers, used as a second language, typically evolves in situations where speakers of different language need to communicate. So why do pidgins develop? A pidgin is a language which has no native speakers. That's what I have said a while ago. Pidgin develop as a means of communication between people who do not have common language. So a pidgin is no one's native language. Pidgin seems particularly likely to arise when two groups with different language languages are communicating in a situation where there is also a third dominant. For example, in Tok Pisin in Papua New Guinea, started as a pidgin language but has since developed into a more complex form, now serving as a national language. So that's an example. Tok Pisin in Papua New Guinea, Hawaiian Pidgin in Hawaii. So what kind of linguistic structure does a pidgin language have? Pidgin language are created from the combined efforts of people who speak different languages. All language involves may contributed to the sounds, the vocabulary, and the grammatical features. So that is pidgin. So let's proceed to creoles. Creoles is a pidgin which has acquired native speakers. Many of the languages which are called pidgins are in fact now creoles languages. If you say a creole is a stable, natural language that develops from a pidgin when it becomes the first language of a community. Creoles have fully developed grammar and vocabulary and are used in all areas of life. So the characteristic of creoles: fully developed grammar and vocabulary. Native speakers, while the characteristic of pidgin says no native speakers, simplified grammar and vocabulary, while the creoles fully developed grammar and vocabulary. Native speakers often arise in colonial contexts, where a pidgin evolves into a creole among a a population. So here's an example. Haitan, Creole in Haiti, derived from French and African languages. Louisiana Creole in the United States, derived from the French, Spanish, African, and Native American languages. Jamaican Patois. Sorry for the pronunciation of that word. Jamaican Patois, a Creole derived from English and West African languages. Next is, so to sum it up, in chapter 4 is that vernacular language are informal, everyday languages used within communication. Vernacular languages. To sum it up, vernacular language is, vernacular languages are informal, vernacular languages are informal, everyday languages used within communities, while the and also vernacular is uncodified, while the standard languages are formalized version of language used in official context. So the standard is codified and codified, while the world Englishes reflect the global diversity of English. Lingua franca serve as a common language for speakers of different native languages. So that is World English. That is lingua franca. The pidgins are simplified, no native speakers, created for specific purposes, while the creoles fully develop grammar and vocabulary, and there are native speakers. So that is my report in chapter 4 of social linguistic. For more questions, please don't So that is all my report, and for more questions and corrections and more ideas learning, please just ask me. Thank you very much, everyone, and God bless.